Heritage is difficult to champion. How do you make people relate with the intent to protect something as conceptual as historical heirlooms like old houses and buildings, bridges and churches, old epic tales and songs, and customs and traditions, without discounting the necessity of a future and forward looking development? How can we explain the benefits of heritage conservation and protection to a society riddled with other more pressing problems like underdevelopment, poverty, economic inequalities, and other social ills? We talk about this and more in this episode because expressways over waterways,
Business interests versus heritage?
Heritage sites under threat?
hindi na bago yan. Hi, I am Lee Candelaria.
I am Aaron Malyari.
And I'm Vec Alporja.
And this is Podcast, Conversations on Philippine History, Politics, and Society. This is an episode close to my heart because my dissertation project is a study on memory and heritage. Kaya naman excited akong pag-usapan ng usapin ng heritage sa Pilipinas.
Napapanahon din itong topic natin kasi ang daming mga usapin kaugnay ng heritage na naglipa na kamakailan lang. Kaugnay halimbawa ng, of course, Build, Build, Build project ng Duterte administration at itong paparating na Marcos Jr. administration. Kailangan talaga natin itong episode na to put things into perspective.
At syempre, as historians and perpetual students and advocates of history, historical consciousness and awareness, mahalagang usapin talaga sa atin kung paanong mapapanatili itong ating mga historical structures at hindi lang built heritage pati intangible cultural heritage like epic songs and tales, customs and traditions, festivals at iba pa. So, mahalaga lahat yan.
Kaya naman for this episode, we tapped Dr. Ivan Henares, Assistant Professor of the Asian Institute of Tourism, UP Diliman, na isa ring cultural policy researcher, heritage conservation advocate, at isa sa 2012 10 Outstanding Young Men for his work on heritage conservation. We asked him, paano nga ba natin may papaliwanag ang kahalagahan ng heritage o pamanang bayan sa isang general audience? Heto ang sagot niya.
Siyempre, for the ordinary Filipino, what's in it for them when we preserve our heritage? No? Unang-una, heritage is basically on the conceptual level. No? This is preserving the soul of the nation. No? We're trying to strengthen our identity as a country so that with all the pressures of globalization, and as you can see, we've had a lot of foreign influences here in the Philippines, no? We're still able to showcase kung ano yung atin, to what is truly Filipino. One, no? They always say na, ano yan, panahon ng Espanyol yan, why are we preserving it? We have to remember that much of the heritage that we are preserving from the colonial periods are actually Filipino. Ang bahay na bato, hindi yan bahay ng Kastila. No? Those are Filipino homes. No? That's Filipino architecture that was built during the Spanish colonial period. In other words, pumunta ka sa Espanya, hindi mo mahahanap yung mga bahay na bato. No? Because that is genuinely Filipino. You will never find those types of houses in Spain. No? These are houses especially built from the design of the Bahay Kubo. And of course, it's architecture that was built for a tropical climate. The same thing for the American period. No? That is Filipino architecture that was built during the American colonial period. No? So, napakahalaga na mapreserba natin ito kasi bahagi yan ng global narrative, the Filipino contribution to the global narrative. At the same time, sinasabi nila, ano yan, ang heritage, ano yan, para lang sa mayaman yan, ano, mga upper class, no? But you have to remember also that there are things such as industrial heritage, no? Na kasama din ang lahat ng working class Filipinos. That is also part of their heritage. Vernacular architecture is also part of the heritage of, especially for IP groups, no? So, while some people may feel na, ay, hindi namin heritage yan, pero ano yan kumbaga hindi naman lahat ng heritage sa bansa personally involved ka, di ba? Kanya-kanyang contribution yan Ito heritage ng Ilocos, ito heritage ng Pampanga, ito heritage ng Bulacan, ng Quezon, no? Ng Negros, ng Cebu, no? Ng Mindanao, lalo na ng Bangsamoro, no? Kanya-kanya tayong aspeto na pinag-iisa natin as part of the heritage of the Philippines, no. So, what's in it for the ordinary Filipino? Marami, no. Number one, syempre, malakas yung identity natin, no, as Filipinos, no. We basically are able to understand what is ours, no, what is truly ours as a country. At the same time, Makakatulong ito lalo na kapag pinasok natin ang heritage tourism, ang cultural tourism, no? As we can see in many, wag na tayong lumayo no, sa Pilipinas, sa Bigan, how they've been able to harness their built heritage for tourism development at maraming kumikita doon. Yung mga kutsero, no? Yung mga ating mga kalesa drivers, yung mga nagtitinda sa palengke, yung mga nag-weave ng abel blankets, gumagawa ng longganisa, ng bibingka, no? And many other things. Lahat yan nagbebenepisyo dahil sa built heritage. Napapadami natin yung bisita natin for tourism. No? Ang nagiging main draw natin ay itong mga lumang bahay. Again, Filipino architecture built during the Spanish colonial period. Hindi ito architecture ng Kastila. No? Arkitektura ito ng mga Pinoy na itayo noong panahon ng Kastila. We are able to draw in the crowds, no? And of course, that brings in benefits to everybody. So ano yung magagawa ng heritage? Why are we preserving heritage? Maraming level yan. From the conceptual to the economic, no? To the social, no? Maraming magagawang benepisyo ang pag-preserve ng ating mana or heritage.
Preserving the soul of the nation. Doon muna ako magfo-focus kasi ang ganda ng idea na yon. Agree ako dito kasi ipinapakita ng ating heritage, both built and intangible, yung pagka-Pilipino natin or what it means to be Filipino.
And for those who dismiss our colonial heritage as yun nga, kolonyal, alalahanin natin na yung mga lumang bahay, lumang simbahan, halimbawa, bagamat may impluensyang kanluranin, itinayo yan with Filipino sensibilities and realities. Nabanggit yan ni Ivan, yung tropical climate, yung local availability ng materials, at yung pag-angkop natin sa mga disenyo, Pilipino na yan. So we should not dismiss that as nostalgia for a colonial past or a Spanish or American legacy in the Philippines. Ang katotohanan nga dyan, yung mga naiwang remnants ng ating colonial past, they signify the contestations between colonial and local. And these are something we cannot see outside the Philippines.
Which is also interesting kasi itong colonial heritage natin na ito, it ties us to the global narrative din. Although we say there is a tendency for heritage advocates to focus on the uniqueness of our identity, halimbawa, through heritage din, we see the continuities of our identities with the rest of the world. Yung mga epic songs, customs, and practices natin, may nakikita tayong similarity with other cultures. Yung colonial experience natin and yung colonial resistance, halimbawa, we can also connect that to the rest of the world's experience of the same phenomenon. Through heritage, we see not only how unique we are, but also how connected we are to the heritage of the rest of the world.
Another concept Ivan mentioned and I want to build upon is the idea of vernacular heritage or yung tradisyonal na pamamaraan ng mga komunidad na magtayo halimbawa ng mga kabahayan o mga estruktura ayon sa kapaligiran nila. So, pwedeng kung ano yung available na local material using local practices and know-how. Kasi with this, we could argue that heritage is not just for the rich. Hindi lang ito tungkol sa mga naglalakihang mga lumang bahay. Yung boat building traditions, pati syempre yung house designs halimbawa na lang ng mga taga-Batanes, bahagi yan ng vernacular heritage.
And while not all would be able to relate to all types of tangible and intangible heritage in our country, like ako, di ko maintindihan yung darangen ng mga Maranao kasi di ko alam yung language, or personally, bilang taga Laguna at taga Luzon, masasabi kong may mga tradisyon at kostumbre na hindi ko naman personally masabing bahagi ako. I think it only highlights the cultural diversity in the country. We can still be proud of all of these things, kahit na personally hindi tayo nakaka-relate talaga. Kasi that's the point, di ba? We are not a homogeneous culture. And how boring would that be if we were, we take pride in the variety of our cultural expressions, tangible or not.
Ivan also tells us of the benefit of heritage not only on our national and regional or even local identities, but also economic benefits. Especially before the pandemic, tourism is one of the biggest sectors in boom, and heritage assisted in the development of a lot of tourism sites. We go to different places in our country kasi di ba sabi nga nila Instagrammable or IG worthy yung mga old sites and structures. And of course, mabenta rin ito sa mga foreigners. If we maintain our heritage sites, we could use them as cultural products that boost local economies. Tulad nga ng example ni Ivan about vegan, sa Ilocos. But unfortunately, there are challenges to preserving our heritage. We also asked Ivan about this.
One of the challenges really would be how many of our developers see heritage. They've always seen it as a difficulty. Mas gugustuhin pa nilang clean canvas, meaning i-flatten lahat tapos magtatayo sila ng bagong development. Unfortunately, yung tinatayo nilang bagong development gaya-gaya ng ibang bansa. The architecture that is being built in new developments, they try to say, ano to, European influence. I remember may Chinatown Heritage Center sa Binondo. Pagkatingin mo, ay Singapore Chinatown pala yung ginaya nila, no? Hindi siya Philippine Chinatown, no? So anong I mean, who are we trying to fool, no? Pag nakikita mo yung mga marketing materials nila para sabihin, this is influence of this particular heritage. This is Kapampangan architecture. Pagkatingin mo, teka, wala namang ganito sa Pampanga dati, So who are we trying to fool? No? We are trying to copy yung mga nakikita natin sa ibang bansa tapos sasabihin natin ito yung architecture ng Pinoy. No? I mean, sige, maganda yung architecture ng ibang bansa pero wag na tayo mambola, no? Na ito ay Filipino architecture, no? Na pinapasok natin. And yun yung sad part. No? Hindi nga natin na-highlight yung sariling atin. No?
Ayan na nga, the developers. This is not just private corporations but the government itself or whoever takes charge siguro, ano. Kasi ang talagang problema, at least sa interpretation ko dito sa nabanggit ni Ivan, ang tingin sa heritage ay hadlang sa development. Gusto kong tayuan ng mall itong isang lugar, ay may lumang bahay, gabain na lang natin. Or halimbawa, isang local politician na gusto magpasikat, gusto niyang magpatayo ng bagong bridge instead of just, fixing and retrofitting the old one. May mga ganyang example.
Pwede rin yung mga parish priest na gustong maging modern yung simbahan nila, so sesementohan yung mga walls. Di ba nga, heritage churches usually gawa sa adobe, sa bricks, or sa coral. Nalala ko tuloy yung episode natin last week on urbanization challenges and the future of our cities. Nabanggit ni Ika na utak semento ang mga leaders natin. I think this also applies to heritage, ano? Our idea of modernity is always premised on newness, new materials, new designs. So we discount the possibility of our old structures coexisting with new ones.
Bakit nga ba kasi backward ang tingin natin sa kahit na anong bagay na may kaugnayan sa nakaraan natin, ano? I remember tuloy, intangible cultural heritage naman, yung buklog. Isa itong Thanksgiving tradition ng mga Subanen. It is in danger of disappearing because of weakened practice, diminishing participation, lack of youth interest, and a general loss of significance. These are, I think, the same issues that hound heritage as a whole. And I think symptomatic ito ng ating pagtingin sa models of development and modernity as a whole din. Marami pa example si Ivan ng mga built heritage natin na nasira or sinisira because of our outdated notion of development and modernity.
Mas madali sa kanila na sirain na lang yung mga vista kasi nga they don't wanna make an effort. Like for example, yung Bago train station, tingnan mo yung nangyari, tinakpan ng skyway. Ang lungkot, no? Sana na-consider yan nung ginawa yung plano. And itong Pasig River Expressway, isa pa to, di ba? Ano yung tsura ng historical bridges natin kapag pinatungan mo ng highway sa taas? Sasabihin lang, hindi daw masisira. Come on, huwag na tayo maglokohan dito, di ba? Nakita mo na nga yung Torre de Manila kung ano nagawa niya dun sa Rizal Park. Ito naman Pasig River Expressway. Yun pa lang sa historic bridges pa lang natin, ano magiging itsura? Alangan naman ilagay mo sa ilalim ng tulay, hindi naman magkakasya. Siyempre, it's going to be an overhead expressway. Tapos, para siyang expressway na nasa taas mismo ng mga historic bridges natin. Malacanang, ano kaya magiging itsura ng Malacanang kapag naitayo itong Parex, di ba? Itong mga vista na to, I think in particular yung Pasig River, this is something we should really keep yung kanyang views, no? Dahil ito, I mean, you go to other countries, wala kang makikita parang Pasig River Expressway dun sa kanilang main historical river. Diba? Nakita mo naman yung ginawa ng Skyway dun sa San Juan River, no? Kung ano yung itsura nung sa San Juan River, yan yung magiging itsura sa Pasig River, di ba? So, huwag na tayo maglokohan po ano yung magiging itsura ng Parex.
Hi, so nabanggit yung Parex. So if you listened to our episode last week, na-explain namin doon how building more roads cannot solve the traffic problems of Metro Manila. In fact, the more roads you build, the more you induce traffic. So you cannot solve traffic with more traffic, di ba? But setting aside the stupidity of privileging cars over moving people through mass transport, malaking panganib ang maidudulot ng Parex sa heritage structures along the Pasig River. Hindi lang masisira yung view, masisira yung mismong structures.
At syempre yung river mismo. Sa halip na linisin, pagandahin, make it greener, aba talagang a concrete structure will cover a part of the river. Ang tagal na nating nililinis yung ilog na yan na mahalagang bahagi ng ating kasaysayan, mind you. The river itself is our heritage.
Absolutely agree. Nabanggit din ni Ivan yung Torre de Manila as an eyesore to seeing the Rizal Monument, no? Itong Parex, magiging eyesore din ito. And when we refer to our heritage as part of the nation's soul, how can we appreciate our built heritage structures when our view is blocked or hindered? Kumbaga, para sa akin kasi itong mga heritage sites like the Rizal Monument, or other historical monuments and memorials na, by the way, ay dissertation topic ko, the way we get meaning out of them could be affected by the structures that surround or obstruct our view of them. Not that their importance are diminished just because there are structures that quote-unquote photobomb it, no? Like yung Torre de Manila. Pero again, to paraphrase Ika's episode natin last week, what does it say about us as a people when we allow the markers of our cultural identity to be distracted by structures that don't necessarily add value to our nationhood? Ang saklap.
But there is a way to harmonize heritage and development naman. It's not like one is the antithesis of the other. It has been done. Isang way dito for built heritage lalo na ay yung adaptive reuse. So Ivan talks about this in this excerpt.
The Australian example is proof of success stories. No? In fact, if you read yung kanilang mga literature about adaptive reuse, they say that demolishing a building is a very wasteful process. We are wasting resources na nakaka-apekto ito sa environment. And they say that preserving and retrofitting a building is actually much, much better than demolishing it. And if we use the success stories in Australia, actual buildings that they retrofitted, actual historic structures, particularly industrial structures na retrofit nila for adaptive reuse. No? And you can see that it's actually a very good proposition. You are able to preserve the identity and the character of the place. Kasi ngayon, puro glass na lang ang nakikita natin. I mean, you can incorporate these glass structures with old structures. Just look at those examples that they've been doing in Australia. Kasi syempre, ang daming mga gusali dyan, kinalakihan na ng mga tao. It's part of the historic landscape, the cultural landscape of the place. At ito ay sinasama nga nila sa narrative. No? Tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang narrative ng lugar kapag nagkakaroon ng adaptive reuse ng isang structure.
Ang daming examples nito sa buong mundo, no? Like yung sa Austria. Dito sa Vienna, nakita ko ring example yung gasometer city. These are gigantic gas tanks or holders made out of metal that were decommissioned, but instead of destroying them, ginawang residential area. Imagine nyo, circular walled cities per tank ang dating. It's unique at the same time, may malinaw na use at present. And also, is telling of Vienna's industrial past.
May share ko lang, no, dito rin sa Japan, maraming examples ng adaptive reuse. Just last week, I was in Kyoto and I was really so happy to see the traditional kyomachiya. Ito yung mga old wooden houses, which was once seen as financial liabilities kasi pwedeng magliyab na lang ito anytime, no? But through decisive government action, naging commercial yung use ng mga houses na ito instead of just simply demolishing them. If the world can do it, so can the Philippines, di ba?
And we have good examples ito sa Pilipinas. Tulad na lang nung new National Museum of Natural History na dating Department of Tourism building na ngayon yung mismong building attraction na by itself. So it can be done. But then again, it's always a choice between what is easy, which is, to raise a structure to the ground and build a new one, or what is right, which is to preserve sites for their historical importance or reuse them while maintaining their history.
Speaking of history, we have a new administration coming who has ties to a historical period that might face erasure. That administration is also notorious for shaping our heritage landscape. So we asked Ivan what we can expect and what should happen to our heritage under another Marcos administration. Heto ang sagot niya.
One thing we have to realize is that the incoming administration is actually the first majority elected administration, no, since the 1987 Constitution. And I think that they should use this mandate, no, to really focus on the truth. I think they have nothing else to prove anymore. Nandiyan na sila. No? And it's very important that we really highlight the true stories. No? I do remember that during the first Marcos administration, no, may mga structures na naiba. Naiba yung kwento. Like for example, ang vegan, hindi naman yan puti dati, pero naging puti yan because of preference, no, of the administration to have all the houses whitewashed, no, but they were very colorful homes at the time. And of course, yung Marcos house sa Sarat, no, medyo lumaki ng konti yun, no, hindi naman siya ganun originally. No? So I think magandang balikan natin yung mga narratives na yan. You don't have to sugarcoat them anymore. Kung ano yung katotohanan, ilagay natin sa kwento. Kasi nga, maganda na yung, okay, you already have a historic mandate. It's really putting in the truth already. Kung ano yung totoo. Of course, marami tayong mga incidents, no, from martial law. We really need to keep those narratives accurate, no. At the same time, we also have a lot of architecture during the Marcos administration, no? And we have to realize maraming mga monumental architecture na nagawa ng panahon yun. Ano? And we have to celebrate that particular fact, no? Lalo na yung mga yung CCP complex, again, no? Another Leandro Locsin. Ano? But of course, we also talk about what happened dun sa film center. No? Hindi naman natin kakalimutan yung kwento na hanggang ngayon, syempre, hindi pa nagagamit yung film center. We have to face the truth when it comes to that. And I think that now that they have that mandate, no, magandang linisin na natin yung katotohanan na yan para there's nothing to hide anymore. And we can focus on that as part of healing, no, between both sides. No? I think that would be really the best move forward, no, para matugunan nga natin itong And of course, yung build. No? Again, nung ginawa yung first LRT natin, yung LRT1, no? na one of the buildings na tinamaan dyan, yung ice plant, no? Yung Manila Ice Plant, no? Which was a very important part of Manila's heritage, no? na it survived the Second World War. No? I mean, sayang, no? Now that we are more aware, mas mulat tayo sa kahalagahan ng built heritage and heritage conservation, I think it's very important really to start considering these important structures when we talk about public infrastructure. I mean, kung may matatamaan man, kailangan kasama yan sa studies na gagawin for public infrastructure. In fact, kasama talaga siya sa batas. Kaya lang, alam mo naman ng mga engineers natin, especially on the regional level, no? Pilit nilang kinakalimutan yung aspeto na ito as part of the planning. No? Kaya pag ginagawa na yung proyekto, doon pala nakikita, ay, may tatamaan pala, no? Pero if at the start of the project pa lang ay tinignan na yung tinatawag nga diyan heritage impact assessment, no, mabibigyan pansin na yung mga proyekto na yan. Tulad na lang ng yung Binondo Intramuros Bridge, no, ang laki-laki ng impact niyan, no, doon sa historic fabric ng Intramuros, no? Tapos mga estero ng Binondo pinatungan pa nila diyan sa bridge na yan, no. There could have been other better ways. In fact, bakit hindi tayo gumagawa ng tunnel, no? Pwede naman gumawa ng tunnel across the Pasig River. Siyempre, mas madali gumawa ng bridge na papatong mo lang. No? But these are things that should be considered. No? Kumbaga, parang dinaan sa, sa lighting sa gabi. Para sabihin ng tao, uy, ganda-ganda. Pero hindi nila na-realize that the historic fabric was affected talaga, no? Doon sa lugar. So, napakahalaga na tignan talaga. Hindi lang yung parang hindi lang, ay, ang ganda-ganda nilagyan ng bridge na may magandang ilaw at magandang design. No? But that was a very sensitive area. No? Kung saan tinayo yung bridge na yan. These are things that have to be considered for future infrastructure projects.
The truth. Sa totoo lang, dun lang tayo. With a historic mandate, we should make sure that the next administration sticks to the truth. This also applies to our heritage. Very obvious naman na sa lakas at sa tindi ng disinformation sa bansa sa kasalukuyang panahon, maaari din tong magdulot ng erasure ng historical truths and realities according to whoever is in power. We need to be wary of that.
At huwag na tayo magpatumpik-tumpik pa, no? Binanggit na rin naman ni Ivan, kailangan mo pangalagaan pati yung manifestation ng ating historical experience through stone, steel, and concrete. Because our heritage links to our historical record. Ipakita natin yung katotohanan, huwag nating i-whitewash. At siguraduhin natin hindi mangyayari ito sa ilalim ng isang Marcos leadership.
May mga nabanggit si Ivan tungkol sa paniniguro na sa kagustuhan nating umunlad, dapat isama natin yung heritage natin. Kaya nga sana maging totoo rin sa nakaraan, sa kasaysayan itong administrasyon na to. Kaya naman it goes on without saying na magpapatuloy ang podcast bilang tagapagtaguyod ng katotohanan tungkol sa kasaysayan natin bilang bayan, sino man ang nasa kapangyarihan.
At syempre, magpapatuloy din yung pag-advocate natin sa pagsigurong hindi natin makakalimutan ang ating mga pamanang bayan, tangible or intangible, sapagkat bahagi ito ng kaluluwa ng ating bansa.
And that's it for our penultimate episode ng Hindi na Bago Yan. Yes, isang episode na lang tayo at tapos na ang season na ito. Abangan niyo ang ating final episode next week. Pasalamatan natin si Dr. Ivan Henares of the UP Diliman Asian Institute of Tourism for guesting in the show. And if you're interested in all things heritage and travel, hanapin nyo lang si Ivan sa kanyang social media pages, especially sa Instagram at Ivan Henares.
At syempre, huwag nyo rin kalimutang mag-like, mag-follow, or mag-subscribe sa podcast Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify, at iba pang social media at podcasting platforms. Bisitahin nyo rin ang aming website, podcast.org, para pakinggan ang full interview namin with Ivan.
You'll hear again from us next week. In these very uncertain times, stay safe and have a good one.